So in a previous video that I posted, it was called Why I Felt Angry, Sad, and Lonely for Most of My Life. And if you haven't seen that video, you should check it out. I'll link to it. It's probably going to be somewhere around here on this page. But I touched on this idea of starting to relate to the quote-unquote inanimate, and how we are conditioned to obviously view these things as inanimate or really not worth our attention. It's just sort of like stupid, dead material. And we're really conditioned along with that to desire and seek so much gratification, approval, and stimulation from other people, from other humans. And how this leads to a lot of neuroses, because we're searching for a thing which we probably can never get or fulfill in the way in which we are going about it. So it creates kind of a constant longing, a constant anxiety, and a constant struggle, which doesn't sound like very much fun if you think about it. So the general idea that is with that, and this is really the big thing to get, and once you get this, I think a lot of the other stuff is a little bit secondary, and it's really, perhaps you could call it a right brain way of looking at things, but I don't really like that terminology necessarily, because our hemispheres aren't separate. You know, we can call it the left and the right brain, but it's still one organism, still one system working together, so they're not really separate. But sometimes we can have shifts in perception, we can have shifts in ways of seeing that we could symbolically talk about in those terms. So it's not really in those terms, but perhaps we can just use it for the sake of conversation. But the real overarching theme is the difference between a quantitative awareness and a qualitative awareness. Now, the world that we live in is very quantitative. It's very left brain, very hyper-masculine, and very insecure for all of those reasons. And that's why so many people are really skeptical of anything alternative, or anything spiritual or mystical, or even a bit more philosophical or artistic or creative, or even, why people have a hard time getting their head around a lot of ancient ideas and philosophies is because, perhaps in history we didn't think in such a left brain way. Perhaps we used more of our brain in more of a holographic, holarchical way, more holistic, holy way of seeing the world. Now, granted, not everyone did, but obviously some people did, because we have great art from that time and throughout history, and great literature and great works and tons of things. So that's the number one thing to get, is the qualitative thing, or the qualitative way of looking at things or perceiving things. And it revolves around pattern as well. And what's really opened me up, or what did open me up to that, is studying five-element theory from Chinese medicine. That's one way of looking at it. There's also the tarot. There's also astrology. There's also a lot of other things. Music, art, and literature. All these things have sort of a quality of things. And part of the basic idea of five-element theory is that there's this underlying process or dynamic. It's not an element, because from what I understand, it's not really what the character means. It's more of a movement or a phase, or a phase of energy transformation, which it's always transforming and moving. So one way we can look at that is just underlying, maybe kind of archetype, maybe organization or frequency. There's underlying kind of vibration, which the easiest way I like to look at it is kind of like a music note. If you get at a piano, there's a bunch of C's on that piano, and they all have different qualities to them a little bit. Like, they have qualitative differences and frequency and vibrational differences, but they're all C's. So in that way, we could say the wood element, or the fire element from Chinese medicine, is a certain frequency that can show up on a lot of different octaves. That octave could be spirituality, it could be health, it could be philosophy, it could be music, it could be martial arts, it could be so many different manifestations, or it could be in nature even. But that same, if we have the right qualitative awareness and pattern recognition and symbolic and energetic literacy, we can say, yeah, it kind of has that quality to it, which, if we're hyper left brain and hyper, stuck in the constraints of Aristotelian, Euclidean, Newtonian sort of worldview, then that's going to be really annoying. That's not really going to make any sense to us at all. Likewise, our ability to appreciate music and great art and many of these other things will probably be diminished as well, because art is highly qualitative. music is highly qualitative. You know, a C major chord has a different quality than a C minor chord, than an F minor chord, than an F major seventh chord, and on and on and on. These all have different qualities, kind of feelings to us that give us different kind of, you know, associations. And pretty much most people will agree that a major chord kind of sounds a little bit more happy and bright and you know, a bit more expansive, and a minor chord is a bit more dark and sad and, you know, a little bit more withdrawn and whatever. And most people will agree with that, even if they don't know anything about music, from all walks of life. So within that, there's a real qualitative awareness. So other ways that can then manifest, basically, you know, breaking down specific aspects of music, looking at tone colors and resonances and frequencies and rhythms, and even in a more visual sense, start looking at the interplay of light and dark and shadows, and, you know, how does the sunlight, you know, hit through the tree, because there's all of this stuff around us all the time. We don't ever take the time to really even look at it. So that's really what it comes down to, as a way of seeing. Taking the time to snap out of the head chatter or whatever minutia that we're caught up in, or some bullshit conversation that we're having with another person because we're too insecure to actually be silent and present with what's around us. Just maybe tune that out and just look at the cloud and say, well, you know, we can just look at it, we can see it, but then we can engage our faculty and say, well, how is light playing on that? How is dark playing on that? How is shadow? What is that color? What is that color like? What does that color feel like? What does it remind me of? What does it bring up for me? What is that? We start asking these questions and having this exploration. And at some times it's going to be a conscious thing which we go through, and other times it's going to be just sort of something will hit us. We'll be walking and we'll look over, whoa, what the? We'll see this amazing vision of, you know, light going through trees and then casting this trippy, crazy, amazing pattern on the sidewalk, and we can just look at that, and it's moving and it's glimmering, and we're just seeing like magic or art all around us, or trees blowing in the wind. Ooh, what is that? What is that pattern like? What is going on? And then we can look at it, you know, the tree is moving in and of itself, or the wind is moving the tree, or we can just experiment with these different ways of looking at the quality of that and seeing what it really reminds us of, and seeing the different frequencies that might show up. So if we're drawn to astrology, we might like those terms. If we're drawn to painting or photography, we might like that. If we're drawn to music, that might be it. If we're drawn to words, that might be our thing. If we're drawn to dance, that might be our thing. There's all these different ways in which we can express and explore these different qualities. And the same thing is true with really anything in the natural world. You know, when we go out in the woods, or we go out in nature, or we just, you know, like a lot of people I see, they have headphones on, they're listening to their Beats by Dre, or they have a speaker with them, or they're just, you know, stomping along in the woods, like creating all this noise and just, you know, head down kind of in their own world, and or having some conversation, which is obviously something wrong with any of those things, but how often are we just open? How often are our eyes up, you know? And that's part of the thing, is our modern world, is our vision gets very, very tunnel, very like myopic. You know, we're staring at screens all the time, and we're focusing on these little bits, and then it becomes harder and harder for us to zoom out and see more of the whole picture without focusing on little mechanized pieces of it. So that's another way of looking at this shift in awareness. But really, it's also tuning into just the feeling state and tuning into the present moment. So if we start to get really caught up in something, then we can figure out how to express, or how to go with it, or how to just jam on it, so to speak. And that's really what I was getting at in that idea about relating to the inanimate, because a lot of people kind of think that's not really inanimate. And I'm not suggesting going to either extreme. What I'm saying is maintaining some both, because, you know, at least for playing music, in my experience, there's a time to just focus and practice and just play the same thing over and over and over again, and over and over and over again. Play the scale and play the chord and just do this repetition thing. And a lot of people just can't do that. They're like, I just want to be creative. I just want to express myself. I just want to be free. I don't have time for all this. I don't have the discipline. I don't have the dedication. I don't have the focus. It sounds so boring. But then, do they ever really get to the point of expressing and producing. Maybe, but from what I've seen, it's not really that possible or that easy. But if we're able to sink into that process, in and of itself, that can become hypnotic. It can become meditational. It can be so many things. We can start to tune into our ear and get lost in the sound, and then eventually get into a state where, are we playing it or is it playing us? And it gets into these really weird things. And that can be true with writing, with dancing, with painting and drawing, or any type of artistic thing. But it's not necessarily in the actual thing. It's a way of seeing. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a way of thinking. It's an awareness. It's a mode of perception, which we can really look at anytime. It can be there anytime because it's all around us all the time. And we can start applying that to our own life, observing our thoughts, observing our emotions, observing the recurring themes and patterns in our life, and honing up on our symbolic literacy, our pattern recognition, and our kind of energetic literacy, and getting adept and attuned to what the hell is actually happening. What is this process called John Doe or Jane Doe or whoever we might be? And not necessarily trying to take the common approach, which is, all right, I have to understand. I need the answer. I need the formula. Just tell me in this limited form. So what we're kind of saying to the universe is like, look, I need you to turn up your volume so I can hear you. But that's probably never going to work. What about retuning our ears? What about getting rid of the noise and the bullshit that keeps us from hearing that voice in the first place? But then people are like, I don't have time for that. It sounds like a lot of work. It sounds boring. Ugh. All right, forget all this work. I'm just going to go, get the right teacher, join the right club, join the right gym, buy the right clothes, buy the right t-shirts, get the right tattoos, get the right piercings, listen to the right music, do all these things because it's just easier. All these other people have already done all the work for me. I don't have to bother with all this, discipline or dedication or all that boring bullshit of, I just want to be free. I just want to play all the time. Maybe not. So, something to think about, perhaps. So hopefully this has expanded upon the idea and given you different jumping off points, because I could go on this for hours. But definitely, if you're interested, I can't necessarily. I think I can think of a few books. One is The Artist's Way, which is just more about writing and creativity. Another one is called The Tao of Music. I think another book's called How Music Works. Those are pretty much all I can think of right now as far as specific books. But studying symbolism, studying any of the disciplines that I've talked about previously, and even just asking, like, what do you like? What are you attracted to? What sounds cool? Don't worry about if you're going to be good at it. Don't worry about how much money you can make from it, or what people will think, or how hard it'll be, or anything. Just have fun. Actually, enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, then don't do it. And there's a distinction there, because when you're learning something new, you might enjoy it, but you also might not enjoy it. It's the weird kind of thing. It's just kind of like if you're really out of shape, you're probably not going to enjoy getting back in shape, but you are kind of going to enjoy it past a certain point. But there's an element of resistance that we're kind of not really going to enjoy. So it's a weird thing, because the only reason I mention is a lot of times people are really black and white in either or, and they say, well, I gave it a shot, but I didn't like it. It was hard. So no, there's really subtleties in there that are outside the scope of this video. So anyways, that's it. I highly recommend it. Anytime you feel alone, you feel lonely, you feel isolated, you feel pretty much any emotion, whatever, however you feel, just realize that you can tune into this awareness wherever you are. And you can just pay attention to all the things that you're choosing to not see all the time. Think about the details in the rooms in a room that you're in right now that you never notice. And it's all there. It's all around us all the time. We just choose to not even consider it. So I guess instead of hating the physical world, like we're conditioned to do. We're thinking, oh, I gotta get out of here. This place sucks. I gotta get somewhere else better. Or saying, oh, let's just totally just go with the physical and be, hedonism and sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all that shit. That's just like saying, oh, well, the right brain's better than the left brain, so I'm only going to be right-brained. Or like what most people believe is the left brain is better than the right brain, so let's only do that. What about both? What about actualizing more of our intelligence rather than less? What about being more holistic and more of a human rather than less? What about more richness and variety and diversity and enjoyment of life rather than less? I don't know. It's a revolutionary idea, but something to consider. So last thing I'll say is I think once we start to really understand this qualitative awareness, a lot of philosophies and art and symbolism and movies and so many things will have a whole other depth. Our interactions with people will be much more deep. Our own life experience will be much more rich and deep and entertaining. Not to say it's going to be pleasurable all the time, not to say it's going to be painful all the time, but who knows. So thanks for watching this video. If you like it, subscribe to my channel, post the video, share it, and post a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.